Hello again, and welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. Our podcast aims to provide distinctive perspectives and concepts for building leadership capacity to meet the challenges of a volatile and uncertain future. I am Dr. John Dentico, your host. Can a company do well and do good? Can there be a true alignment of values between an employee and their organization? And is this alignment truly necessary? If the answers to these questions interest you, then I am confident that my conversation with Mr. Chase Friedman, fractional CMO and founder of Vanquished Media Group, will not only be informative, but compelling. So let's get started. And if you enjoy our podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. We genuinely appreciate your support. Good day to you, and welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. John Dentico. Today, we're going to shift gears a bit and talk with an accomplished leader about branding, and in particular, purpose-driven branding. My guest today is Mr. Chase Friedman, who serves as a fractional CMO and founder of Vanquished Media Group, an impact marketing agency. Chase's core philosophy is the belief that all businesses and organizations have the potential to do good and do well, to profit with purpose. To achieve this balance, he aligns the comprehensive efforts of inspired brand strategy, storytelling, and marketing designed to transform audiences into ambassadors. With a diverse client portfolio, including venture capital-backed startups, small and mid-sized businesses, and nonprofits, Chase provides strategic brand marketing leadership, resulting in sustainable growth and societal impact. His work so far resulted in over 1,500 branded content assets with over 500 million views, resulting in 45 million plus in revenue and donations. Chase has proven the potential for any business to profit with purpose. Chase is a member of 1% for the Planet, commits his time to multiple pro bono and not-profit initiatives, and serves on the board of advisors for the nonprofit Film to Future Foundation. I am pleased and honored to have him here today. Hello, Chase. How are you?
I'm doing well. The honor is all mine. And
I appreciate you saying
if you haven't heard it before, you've got an announcer's voice. I have not heard it pitched that well. So thank you for that wonderful intro.
Let's get down to business and let's talk about branding with purpose. So here's the first question I have for you. Define what you mean by purpose-driven branding.
Great question. To put it simply, to put it bluntly, what do you believe and what do you stand for as a brand beyond the bottom line? Most businesses, shareholder-driven capitalist says, what is the bottom line? What are we making? How much money? But in this new sort of conscious capitalism, stakeholder-driven capitalist society, it's more about what do you stand for? What do you believe? What is your identity as a brand beyond that bottom line? But you can have both, as I mentioned, profit with purpose.
Right. What's interesting, I see so many things come across my desk in terms of employees and the movement to a values-based alignment. Talk about that for a minute. It seems, it is, in fact, the fact that employees now are looking to align their own particular values with an organization's values. Why don't you talk about that for just a couple of minutes?
You're spot on. We've certainly seen and experienced what was considered a great resignation during the pandemic, this quiet quitting movement. And I think what a lot of that is a symptom of people really wanting to find deeper meaning and purpose in their lives and by extension, their work and the work that they do. No longer just showing up for a paycheck, a 9 to 5, clock in, clock out, but how can their work provide them a deeper meaning in life to find more fulfillment, more joy? And so to your point around, what the top talent is seeking, in a job. Millennials, for example, are going to make up nearly 75% of the workforce in just a couple of years by 2025. 83% of millennials as a generation state, and this is research backed, state that they would be more loyal and productive and responsible employees to companies that align with their values. That number even goes up significantly when you talk about Gen Z in terms of what they are desiring and seeking in the workforce with employers and companies that help align and support their beliefs.
Yeah, it's amazing. I read a statistic the other day that said that I think it was amongst the millennials and certainly the Gen Xers and Gen Zs, the average time they spend at one position or at a job is 4 years. And one of the issues that organizations are facing is retention.
Absolutely.
We hired them. We got the right people in the front door. They seem to be doing a good job. And then 4 years later, with a fairly significant amount of corporate knowledge, we could say, or internal understanding of what's really going on in the organization, they bolt and they leave and go someplace else.
Yeah.
Do you think brand purposed organizations can leverage a greater sense of retention?
Not only can they, but they must. In order to survive, they must. And I don't mean just a checking of a box, which a lot of companies are akin to do, but how do you bridge that promise of what you stand for and believe with performance? Meaning measurable effort, resource allocated efforts to make good on that promise, what you want to do in the world, how you support and serve your own house, employees first, internal stakeholders, as well as external stakeholders. Companies are losing, hundreds of billions of dollars are being lost each year with companies due to churn, reduced retention, lower productivity. This is a big bleeding financial pain point for organizations. And so if you're looking to course correct and meet the top talent and employees where they are, what better way to lean into defining and adhering to your purpose and values as a company?
I agree completely. I think we've lost a lot of that. And I think for me, one of the factors that to me is the most important, and I'd like you to comment on this, is
Sure.
the ability of the senior leaders in the organization or mid-level leaders and their employees to build a sense of mutual, not only a sense, but to build real mutual trust amongst one another. Why don't you talk about that for a minute, if you could?
There's this kind of phrase and term that's called purpose paradox. And what that kind of suggests is that even with this edict, this mantra, this belief system at the highest level of leadership and organizations, there still becomes this disconnect where the purpose that they are espousing they want to do and commit and achieve in the world, they're not even doing on their own home front. They're not even doing for their own employees and their own organizations. It's the barefoot cobbler. We're great at making shoes for other people, but we're walking around barefoot. Okay. And it also suggests that there is this break in this disconnect between the leadership mandated purpose and values and more of kind of the lower or even mid-tier ranks of employees. It's getting lost in kind of that messy middle of organizations, that mid-tier management maybe not being as consistently executed or adhered to by HR. And so you've got the top of the organization and the hierarchy saying one thing, and the actual boots on the ground, people saying, that's not what it really looks and feels like to work here. So you've got this big gap they need to close.
And then people wonder why there's quiet quitting. They wonder why there's quiet restraint. I don't know if you're familiar with quiet restraint, but that's when, for example, if someone knows that another person needs a particular piece of information in order to do their job, they hold it back. I'm sorry. I'm not giving you that. Go ahead.
No, that's interesting. And that goes against what is being popularized in the zeitgeist, whether you want to say for TikTok or not, but no gatekeeping. We're entering this era of don't gatekeep, share what is of value for others. No, but it's interesting and it's unfortunate because once again, we're talking about leaning into values and purpose here. We're not talking about doing something that is black hat. We're talking about doing good and committing to do good in the world. That can also help your business recruit, retain, gain more innovation and productivity. This, like I said, this is not a can, but a must.
I agree. I like to say that there's this old saying that the only two sure things in life are death and taxes. I'm sure you've heard that. I said, but there's another one. The one comes to organizational dynamics, and that is the level of effectiveness of an organization is directly related to the level of mutual trust.
Mm.
If you don't have that, you don't have the sharing, you don't have the information flow. So, where to use a cliche, where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, everybody working together. How many times have you and I seen the word collaboration? Just it's like a broad paintbrush that people paint things with all the time. Hey, collaboration, we have to, but there's some fundamental things at the core of collaboration, like trust, that absolutely is essential. Let me move on to another question now. Let's talk about strategy. I'm a big strategy guy, strategic thinking, strategic planning. Tell me how, in your opinion, how brand purpose drives strategy.
I think brand purpose is the North Star, the compass, whatever you want to call it, that drives everything about your company strategically and execution on down. Without a singular focus and understanding of where you're going, how are you going to craft and determine how you will get there, which is strategy? How do you measure and align all of those elements, those variables, those obstacles you're inevitably going to encounter along the way back to what is our core purpose? What do we stand for? So I think strategy must be born of and constantly stress tested against brand purpose. That's to put it short and bluntly.
No, I agree. Let's talk about some other point that I noticed in our communication before we actually did this podcast. Is this? We've talked about strategy driving, or let's say a purpose driving strategy. Let's talk now about the profitability side, because in the end, organizations need to make money if they're going to go on, if people are going to work in that place and have a life and provide for their families or whatever, to buy tires for their car, those kinds of things. Let's talk about the profitability side of the equation.
Certainly. And one thing I wanted to mention in regards to purpose and strategies, just to back for a moment, great strategy without great unifying, compelling, inspiring story to really connect and inspire people to execute on that can also ring empty. Brand purpose is how you develop your brand identity, your messaging, your story. And I've written a couple pieces on it, how story and strategy really are two sides of the same coin. They need to leverage off one another, because you can have this brilliant strategy that people aren't inspired and activated by. And you can also have a wonderful story without the really true kind of architecture and chassis of a strategy to implement that. So that's, again, how I see both of those kind of in tandem. And back to your question around profitability. So we've already talked about how potentially companies can be saving a heck of a lot of money by investing in brand purpose to not only reduce churn, increase retention, et cetera, from employees. So the beautiful thing about this is that it's got multiple benefits. People are willing to buy from, work for, and invest in purpose-driven companies, more than your generic competitor. So from a margin and market share standpoint, from a consumer standpoint, some more data and research to back it up. Consumers are 4 to 6 times more likely to purchase from, protect, and champion purpose-driven companies and brands. So now we're talking about market share, how you can grab some of that market share back from conscious consumers that are 4 to 6 times more likely to purchase from them. Consumers are also willing to pay, and this is two in 3 consumers are willing to pay a price premium, pay more for products and services from social impact or value aligned brands. So now you're talking about margin. So we've got increased market share, increased margin, Not to mention the staying power of building a consumer that's not just buying a one-off cheapest low-cost option at an Amazon or a Walmart. You're talking about building a brand ambassador, someone that is willing to go to bat for you, continue to buy from you, be a lifelong customer, tell their friends and family about it. So that's just exponential impact there.
Okay, great. Let me ask you this question. As you're talking, I'm thinking, what does a company, an organization have to do to transmit that message, to let potential buyers, consumers, and potential employees of the organization, how would you advise them? If you were a coach coaching me right now, how would you advise them to get that message across?
Yeah, I am and I do. And that's what I love doing every day. It's different for each unique company, but I do believe that it starts from the inside out. I do believe you need to build internally that culture of authenticity and trust and accountability to that brand purpose within your own ranks, from the bottom up and the top down. And again, like we talked about earlier, if you don't have the trust and buy-in of your employees from organizational culture building programs, volunteer efforts, things that get people's hands tangibly on what you're trying to strive for as a company to do good in the world, they will in turn become your greatest ambassadors. So before you start preaching it on social and telling everybody about all this great stuff you're doing, how wonderful would it be if your own employees and internal stakeholders are the ones on the front lines doing that for you? So inside out first. And from the outside, again, I believe in brand storytelling as a beautiful medium to do that. And that's evolved. I'm in a network called Brand Storytelling, which is really disrupting the traditional interruptive ad model that companies have relied on for years, commercials that just blast you with features and benefits and,
right,
and price. And instead leading with telling authentic stories, not about you as the brand. You're not the hero here. The hero is your customer. Telling authentic, compelling, inspiring stories about the people that you serve or hope to serve, and building true brand affinity and trust that way. And of course, you got to walk the walk. What are you willing to do to invest in such programs? I don't just mean at the end of the year, whatever's convenient out of your pocketbook to give a one-time philanthropy, not give a man to fish, but teach a man to fish, creating shared value.
I agree. Brilliant. That's absolutely my philosophy as well. One of the themes of the book, my book, is a simple one, something I learned about a long time ago. And that is that if you take care of your people, will take care of you.
Yeah.
And I have never been disappointed by that comment. You have to build it inside out. You can't. There was something several years ago, I read something where we were so much caught up in the culture. Take care of your customers. Take care of your customers. Take care of your customers. And in the meantime, burning people out in this constant refrain, take care of your customers, until someone came up with the idea that if we take care of our people inside the organization, they'll take care of the customers. It was like, this is a revelation? Are you killing me here?
Yeah.
You really have to understand that, it works from the inside out. And that's beautifully stated. I appreciate that very much. Question. Can you give us, and you don't have to name names here if you don't want to, that's fine with me, but can you give us an example, a follow through, if you will, of an organization perhaps that wasn't in line with this idea and then said, what? Well, Chase is saying something here. We got to get on this. I like this. We want to do this. That made the change, and any results from that. Just can you give the listeners an example?
Sure. I won't name this name because I will tell you, they are a Fortune 100 company.
Okay.
But having worked with them for quite a few years, multiple different campaigns, they optically weren't probably one of the last companies you would expect to lean into this brand purpose thing. Now, they have developed and spun up their own sort of CSR division in DEI and ESG, and they're doing the right things. And arguably, whether it's checking boxes or not, they're putting in the right protocols. But then they began to put their money where their mouth is and investing in a lot, quite frankly, in their model in brand storytelling and spotlighting and uplifting and kind of short documentary series around things like female leaders in STEM fields, up and coming minority Gen Z innovators and entrepreneurs, really underserved communities that were doing incredible things and weren't getting the recognition and spotlight. And so it elevated these folks, told really compelling, humanizing stories that in turn are built to inspire others to do the same. And kudos to them, the brand was nearly invisible in this content. There's no products, there's no place, there's no services, there's no brand naming anywhere. It is just good storytelling for good storytelling's sake. And building sort of experiences and microsites to capture the momentum and the community buzz around people that were supporting these stories and figures, that were sharing their own stories. And so there was a compounding effect. And I think that's something that I truly believe in, is that if you are willing to invest in something and say, we might not see the immediate ROI, but we trust in the process, know that it's going to build greater brand affinity down the road. And we can be willing to be in the back seat, be nearly invisible in that process, and not have to tout our brand and product all over it. Let's trust our conscious, enlightened consumers to believe in something, to align with something, and hopefully come to us when they are ready to buy and support and engage with us, in transactional level.
Absolutely. I have written this idea down, and I wrote it in my book and different things like that. The repository for stories are the repository for culture. If you have no stories, you have no culture. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. Whether you're sitting on your grandfather's knee and listening to stories about his first car or whatever, if you have no stories, you have no culture. And if you want to change the culture, you have to change the stories. And
the reason, it's said.
If you change the culture, change the story. And then what you do with these stories is, because what stories do is they carry, in my opinion, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, motivation factor, and that is meaning. These stories carry meaning, and they mean something to people. And to me, that's what happens. People hear and they connect to a new story, and they connect to a new way of doing things. So I think your work is brilliant. It's right on the money. We're traveling, if you will, down the same road. And I will tell you, I mentioned this to you, I've just emerged from an 8-month rebranding effort myself. And the whole lead sim, throttle up leadership. I had, in a manner of speaking, 4 legs on a stool, and they were all the wrong size. They were not the same size, but right now I feel as though everything is working together. And I can say that for the first time in a long time, that I've ever actually had all these pieces of my brand and the lead sim throttle up leadership brand working together. So I understand completely. Take it to heart, because I've been through this process and I understand how.
And you know this stuff, and you do this stuff for a living. And it's, like I said, that barefoot cobbler, it's easy. It's sometimes it comes natural to do and see for others, but not as easy to apply for ourselves. But I've been there and had those pivots and those stumbles and those falls and brought to my knees moments that, through resilience, taking a moment, self-reflection, okay, what is really truly important here? What do I want to do in the world, and how can I best serve others? Pay it forward. So that's wonderful that you're getting that clarity.
Yeah, it's great. So listen, let me ask you one last question for our time here. And that is simply this. If you had a magic wand and you could change anything in the landscape of businesses and organizations today, what would you change?
Great question. I would simply wave this wand and allow everyone to see and act upon this paradigm of you can do good and do well. To have every single business out there, for profit, nonprofit, small, large, Fortune 500, commit to doing a greater good for themselves, their team, the world, right? Beyond the bottom line, because then we all benefit. Then we've changed the game. And one of us alone cannot make this huge, massive change. I'm not the one on the front lines of combating climate change or social, civil inequities. But if I can help inspire others to find their value, their stake, their belief, their core, and they can inspire and pay it forward to someone else, then we've got a multiplier effect. So if we're doing good and doing well and profiting with purpose, everybody wins.
I agree with you. I think that this is going to be this is a driving force for the 21st century. No question in my mind.
Amen.
Yeah. Anyway, listen, Chase, you've been a great guest, and I appreciate so much your time, your patience, and your information for my listeners and for anyone else who happens to walk across our YouTube channel. So I want to thank you for today, and I appreciate it, and I look forward to talking to you in the future. Thank you very much. And thank you. And thank you for all of you listeners and viewers on different podcast channels. I appreciate your time and your patience and for being here with us today. Thank you so much and have a great day.